The night Lisa Summers was murdered, she had her school books with her. That detail alone tells you everything about who she was. Not a girl running from something. Not a girl making dangerous choices. A girl pedaling home in the dark after a late shift, textbooks in her backpack, dreaming of a better life for herself and her mother. She never made it home. And for 16 years, the man who stopped her walked free. Lisa Summers was 18 years old and she carried the weight of two people on her shoulders. Her father had left when she was an infant, and from that moment forward, it was just Lisa and her mother Dorothy, two people orbiting each other in a small apartment in Indianapolis, making do with whatever they had. Dorothy's health was failing. The bills needed paying. The paper route needed running. And when her mother could not manage it, Lisa was already lacing up her shoes. There was no one to hand Lisa an easy path. No safety net. No backup plan. She worked at a fast food restaurant. She took classes. She shared a paper route with a woman who depended on her completely. And she did all of it without complaint, without bitterness, and without ever asking for recognition. Her best friends Billy and Julie knew exactly who she was. They had the kind of friendship that teenagers believe is permanent, the kind where you make pledges about living in the same neighborhood forever, raising your children together, staying inseparable. Lisa was the cautious one in that group. She was the girl in the pretty dresses who scolded her friends for smoking. The one who thought before she acted. The one who watched out for everyone else. She was not the kind of person anything like this was supposed to happen to. And yet on the night of June 15, 1989, Lisa clocked out of the restaurant at 12:24 in the morning, climbed onto her bicycle, and rode out into the dark. She had done it hundreds of times before. She knew these streets. She knew her neighborhood. She had no reason to believe this night would be any different. It was. The call came in the following morning. A body had been found in a field. When the first officer arrived, he saw the bicycle before he saw anything else. Then the backpack, its contents scattered across the ground. Then the clothing, torn, displaced. Then her. The scene told its own story before a single word was spoken. The drag marks. The position of the body. The condition of her clothing. Lisa had fought. She had clawed and resisted and refused to surrender. And she had lost. Evidence was collected carefully. A cigarette butt. Blood. Semen residue. Her bra. Everything was bagged and documented. The two young men who had discovered the body were still at the scene, and the lead investigator, Detective Earl Cooper, spoke to them. One of them, a man named David Ashworth, walked with a pronounced limp. Cooper noted it. Filed it away. And moved forward. Dorothy Summers was notified that morning. Her daughter, the girl who had kept the lights on and the rent paid and brought her medicine and stayed by her side when everyone else had gone, was dead. Dorothy, already fragile, was now shattered. She had reported Lisa missing 4 or 5 days before the body was found. She had known something was wrong. Mothers almost always do. The investigation in those early days moved quickly, the way all fresh homicide investigations do. Witnesses were interviewed. A motive was sought. And then a name surfaced from the most routine of places. Lisa had recently had a confrontation at work. A female coworker, roughly the same age, had threatened her over a shared boyfriend. It was the kind of drama that flares up in teenage workplaces and usually dissolves just as fast. But the words that had been spoken were pointed. Witnesses had heard them. Someone had looked Lisa in the eye and said the next time she saw her with him, she would kill her. Those words land differently once someone is dead. Cooper brought the young woman in. She was shaken, defensive, and insistent. She had not meant it. It was anger talking. She would never have actually hurt Lisa. And when Cooper worked through the details, when he measured the threat against everything he knew about the girl who had spoken it, he came to a conclusion he did not rush to but also could not avoid. This was an 18-year-old squabble. Ugly words spoken in a moment of jealousy. not a murder. She was cleared. Then came the witnesses. A mother had called the department with information her daughter and a friend wanted to share. They had been stranded on the side of the road late that night, and a man had walked past them. What they noticed most was his limp. He was tall and thin, somewhere between 6 feet and 6'2", with longish dirty brown hair. Shortly after he passed them, they watched a young woman on a bicycle catch up to him. She appeared to be wearing a fast food uniform. She looked about 18. The man said something to her. They started talking. And then they disappeared together over the other side of the highway. When Cooper reviewed this account, one name came back to him immediately. David Ashworth. He was one of the 2 men who had found Lisa's body. He walked with a limp. Cooper had noticed it on the day of the discovery and now it was surfacing again from an entirely different direction. He brought Ashworth in. The story Ashworth told was measured and calm. He had spent the evening with his friend Jim, been dropped off at a bar on 34th Street around 10 or 11, left around 12:30, and gone home to his wife. He had nothing to hide. He agreed to a polygraph without hesitation. He failed it. Polygraphs are not admissible in court, and Cooper knew that. But what a failed test does is sharpen focus. It tells an investigator where to look more carefully. Cooper went directly to Ashworth's wife, Diane. She confirmed her husband's account. He had come home around midnight, 12:30 at the latest. He had been in bed with her all night. She said it steadily. She said it without apparent hesitation. And at the time, Cooper had no evidence strong enough to contradict her. So Ashworth remained a name in the file. A name with a limp. A name with no alibi that could be independently verified, but also no alibi that had yet been broken. The case remained open. The cigarette butt and the biological evidence went to the crime lab. The DNA technology of 1989 was new, expensive, and inconsistent. The results came back inconclusive. Lisa's body had lain in that field for 4 or 5 days before being discovered, and the samples had degraded beyond what the technology of that era could interpret. The case went cold. Years passed the way they always do in stories like this, quietly and then suddenly. Dorothy Summers died in July 2006, 17 years after her daughter was murdered, without ever seeing anyone answer for what had been done to Lisa. She went to her grave without that. The investigators who learned of her passing felt something that sat beyond professional frustration. This was a woman who had lost her only child, her caretaker, her companion in every sense of the word, and the system had not been able to give her even the smallest comfort of justice before she was gone. It was the kind of outcome that makes people question everything. By December 2004, 15 years after the murder, the case was assigned to Indianapolis's cold case unit. Detective Bill Rogers picked up the file and started reading. And he noticed something the original investigation had established but circumstance had never allowed to fully develop. The question of David Ashworth had never truly been resolved. It had only been paused. Rogers went back to the beginning. He confirmed that the coworker threat had been properly cleared. He confirmed that the informants who had come forward 7 months after the murder, 2 men in the county jail claiming that a fellow inmate named Kevin Johnson had confessed to them, had ultimately been exposed as exactly what they were. Men looking to have their sentences reduced, trading invented information for reduced time. They had claimed personal knowledge of the crime but could not describe a single detail that had not already been made public. Cooper had seen through them and Rogers confirmed the assessment. That left Ashworth. And then a name appeared in the file that Rogers had not yet followed up on. Charlotte Ledbetter. A woman from the neighborhood who had known Ashworth socially through mutual friends and his ex-wife. She had come forward almost 2 years after the murder and told Cooper something that had never stopped being significant. On the morning of the murder, in the early hours before sunrise, Charlotte had been driving home after dropping her boyfriend at a construction site. On her way back, heading up toward 34th Street, she spotted a man walking on the road. She recognized the limp immediately. It was David Ashworth. He was dirty. scratched, disheveled in a way that had nothing to do with a long night at a bar. She pulled over and offered him a ride. He refused at first, then accepted, but asked her to drop him off before his house. He did not want his wife to see him arrive. When Charlotte asked what had happened to him, Ashworth said he had passed out in a portable toilet and gotten into a fight. Over the days that followed, the story shifted. First the portable toilet. Then he said he had been arrested. Then he had fallen into bushes. 3 different explanations for the same set of scratches, the same state of disarray, the same early morning hour that should have found him asleep in bed with his wife. Charlotte had waited nearly 2 years to come forward because she had not wanted to be responsible for putting an innocent man in prison. That reluctance was honest and human. But what she had seen was not nothing. Rogers cross-referenced her account with Ashworth's friend, the man who had been with him when the body was discovered. That friend confirmed something that had always seemed slightly off. Ashworth was not a morning person. But on the day the body was found, Ashworth had called him, suggested they go out to watch planes at the airfield, and then, as they walked along 34th Street, it was Ashworth who suggested cutting through the field. There was a perfectly usable driveway half a block away. There was no reason to cut through that field unless you already knew what was there. Then the alibi cracked completely. Cooper had eventually been contacted by Diane Ashworth's new husband, calling from Tennessee. He said Diane had something she needed to say. The divorce had given her distance from David. The distance had given her courage. She admitted she had lied. David had not come home at midnight. He had come home around 6:30 or 7 in the morning, scratched and dirty, and she had been frightened of what it might mean if she told the truth. 6.5 hours. From 12:30, when Lisa had clocked out of work and climbed onto her bicycle, to 7 in the morning when Ashworth finally walked through his back door, asking to be dropped off so his wife would not see him arrive. 6.5 hours that his original alibi had attempted to erase entirely. Rogers now had 2 witnesses contradicting Ashworth's own account. He had a man who had led his friend directly to a body he had no logical reason to know was there. He had a pattern of shifting stories, a failed polygraph, and a timeline that placed him in the right location at the right time with no credible explanation for where he had been. But he did not yet have physical evidence. He returned to the crime scene inventory and went through it again. Not to review what had been tested. To see what had not. And there, untested after all those years, was Lisa's bra. The original lab work had focused on the cigarette butt and the biological material collected from the scene. The bra had been packaged and stored but never submitted. The original investigators had done the right thing. They had preserved it properly. They had kept every item sealed and catalogued, trusting that someday the technology would be ready even if it was not ready yet. Rogers submitted the bra to the lab. 2 weeks later, the phone rang. On the inside of Lisa Summers's bra, laboratory analysts had identified a microscopic blood drop. The DNA extracted from it was a match for David Ashworth. The cigarette butt collected from the crime scene on the morning her body was found also came back with his DNA. 16 years and 3 months after Lisa Summers pedaled home from work for the last time, there was an answer. Rogers flew to Lakeland, Florida, where Ashworth had been living quietly, working for an irrigation company. He coordinated with the Polk County Sheriff's Department and they brought Ashworth in together. The moment Rogers identified himself, Ashworth already knew. He said as much. He asked if this was about that girl from Indianapolis. It was. In the interview room, Ashworth was composed. He said he had given his side of the story 16 years ago. He said he had never gotten closer than 10 or 15 feet to the body. He said the smell had bothered him. He said he had not touched anything. Rogers placed the DNA documentation in front of him. Ashworth looked at it and said the test was wrong. There was nothing more to say after that. The evidence had already done its speaking. David Ashworth was charged with the murder of Lisa Summers. The trial came in March 2008, nearly 19 years after the night a young woman named Lisa rode her bicycle away from a fast food restaurant for the last time. The prosecution presented the reconstructed sequence of events. A man walking in the dark, drinking. A girl on a bicycle in a work uniform, doing nothing wrong, heading home. An advance. A refusal. A moment in which one person's inability to accept that refusal cost another person everything. Lisa had fought. The evidence had always shown that. She had clawed at him. She had not surrendered. Her clothing had been torn in the struggle. And she had left a mark on him, a mark he carried home with him through the pre-dawn streets and could not convincingly explain for the rest of his life. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty. David Ashworth was sentenced to 60 years in prison. Donna Cruz, a neighbor who had known both Lisa and Dorothy, sat in that courtroom and wept. She thought of Dorothy, who had not lived to see this day. She said a prayer and believed, in the way that people hold on to such things when grief has no other outlet, that Dorothy and Lisa were finally together somewhere and that the verdict had reached them both. Billy and Julie, who had grown up as a three-part friendship that had spent 16 years as only two, stood at the cemetery. Billy had never been able to visit regularly during the cold case years. There had been something incomplete about it. Something unresolved that made the visits feel hollow. Now there was a different kind of weight. Still sadness. Always sadness. But something else underneath it, something that felt like the world had finally acknowledged what had been taken. Every milestone they had marked without Lisa, every graduation, every party for their children, every girls' night out, had been shadowed by her absence. Not in a dramatic way. In the quiet, persistent way that real loss works. A chair that should have been filled. A voice that should have been in the room. Detective Earl Cooper, retired and no longer able to chase leads from an active file, had kept Lisa's photograph on his desk for 11 years. He had 3 children of his own, including a daughter close to Lisa's age. He had worked her case the way he would have wanted someone to work a case involving his own child. When the call came about the DNA results, about the conviction, he described himself as happily stunned. That phrase holds something specific inside it. Not triumphant. Not vindicated. Stunned, because after years of dead ends and inconclusive results and witnesses who changed their stories and evidence that was not quite enough, the resolution had finally come. Happy because Lisa deserved it. Because Dorothy had deserved it. Because Billy and Julie and everyone who had sat with her memory in the dark deserved it. Lisa Summers was a girl who carried responsibility beyond her years, who supported her sick mother, who worked late shifts and rode home alone because she had no car and no one to drive her and no sense that the world owed her anything more than what she could build with her own hands. She had schoolbooks in her backpack on the night she was murdered. She had plans. She had a future that belonged entirely to her, and it was taken in a field off a highway in Indianapolis on a summer night in 1989. It took 16 years, 2 detectives, a divorced wife who finally told the truth, a neighbor who gave a man a ride home before dawn, and a microscopic blood drop on the inside of a bra that had been sitting in an evidence bag waiting for technology to catch up to the crime. Some cases close because someone talks. Some close because someone remembers. And some close because a piece of evidence, properly preserved, properly handled, properly trusted, survives long enough to finally say what the victim never could. Lisa Summers has been gone for decades now. But in a courtroom in Indianapolis, in a verdict delivered in under an hour, the world finally heard her name said in the context of justice. She was 18 years old. She was trying to build something real. And she deserved so much more than what she got.